which demonstrates how we need the example of Christ in our lives. And oftentimes we don't even think about it. There are many people that are hurting. There are many people that have a lot going on. And I think of the example that Christ gave us, and I think of, he had a lot going on in his life, didn't he? But he still managed, and he did it better than anybody else. He did it perfectly, in fact. Now, I'm not going to hold you to that standard, Gayla, okay? But I want you to know that, if we're striving to be like Christ, then there's something there for us, and there's something for us to glean. So, tonight we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to have some discussions. Really, we're going to start at 1 Peter again and look at that. And I'm going to read that to you. It starts at verse 14, and it's all the way through 22, and this is the English Standard Version, and it says, "Or to the governors as sent by him to punish those who do evil and to praise those who do good. For this is the will of God, that by doing good you should put to silence the ignorance of the foolish people. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil, but living as servants of God. Honor everyone. Love the brotherhood. Fear God. Honor the emperor. Servants, be subject to your masters with all respect, not only to the good and gentle, but also to the unjust. For this is a gracious thing when, mindful of God, one endures sorrow while suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if, when you sin and are beaten for it, you endure? But when you do good and suffer for it, you endure. This is a gracious thing in the sight of God. For to this you have been called, because Christ also suffered for you, leaving you an example so that you might follow in His steps. He committed no sin, neither was deceit found in His mouth. And when He was reviled, He did not revile in return. When He suffered, He did not threaten, but continued entrusting Himself to Him who judges justly." So the question is how does Peter say we should be? In so many respects, he says that the question is, how does Peter teach slaves to bear up under mistreatment and suffering? By reminding them that Jesus suffered unjustly, and that He says this in an example to us. Another question is, what does Peter say enabled Jesus to suffer wrongfully? That is something to think about. What enabled Jesus to suffer wrongfully?
He entrusted himself to Him who judges justly.
Greg said it correctly. He trusted it in Him who judges justly.
Also, Jesus was here to give Himself for our sins. And also, He knew He would have a mission to do, a thing to do, and nothing was going to stand in the way of that mission.
That's right. Now, Bill, you're getting way ahead of my lesson here. So I'm going to stop you, and we're going to pause there. He was getting ahead, but that's like point number 5, I think. So we're going to get to that in a minute. Going back to what Greg said, Christ entrusted Himself to the one who judges justly. That is, that God will work out everything in the end. All right? So what suffering might we have to do in our daily lives that this teaching could apply to us? And I'll go first. I won't mention the name But if you work in the corporate world, there's a certain term in which is PC. That's politically correct for those of you that don't know. That a lot of these corporations want to be seen as. And so you have these trainings for diversity and inclusion. And a lot of things, it's mainly they're trying to make you accept sin as a part of lifestyle. And so if you step out and rebut against it, you could be publicly shamed in the eyes of the brass of that said company. You could be dismissed from your position at work. You could be demoted, or you could be overlooked. Many things. Some of you may have even experienced that. So that's just one example that we're called to endure. And I know for my perspective, oftentimes I feel like I'm a servant to these corporations because I have to show up and it's every day and it's my life, you know. And we become a slave to that. It's like the rat on the wheel that keeps running. Sometimes you feel like you're just in that trap. So what Christ said was basically, I'm stepping out of that. I want to hold fast to what is the will of the Father, regardless of the consequences of what the world thinks. Does anyone else have
we get hung up on the idea of fairness in our society. And if we're mistreated, we think it's unfair. Well, it was unfair for Jesus to give up the benefits of his godhood and come to earth and put up with the way he was treated here.
Yeah.
So if we follow his example, we kind of have to adopt his attitude of humility and say, I don't care if it's fair. I'm doing what the Father wants me to do, and that's just the way it's going to go.
Thank you. And that brings me to a point, and I was planning on getting to that in a little bit, but I'll bring it up now. One of the things that I've seen is in corporations, they always have this mission statement, but then they'll also have these characteristics of what they want their company to be like. And it's always the top thing is integrity. Integrity is a good thing. We want that. But do we always see that as what's displayed? Not always. So let's reflect on that in our own lives for just a moment. The word and integrity